Translation is part of the humanities. However, I use translation studies as a very useful quarry from which to steal things for teaching purposes. I teach a course called, a postgraduate course called Discourse and the Translator. Actually, as I explained to students in the first day, it is about discourse analysis, but discourse analysis is simply better reading. As John said, close reading. That's what it's all about. And too often, theory ties itself up in jargon. That is my objection to it. I think if you know something well, you can expound it clearly and simply. There is no need for the barbarous jargon with which translation theory surrounds itself. I steal my ideas not so much from Newmark. I steal sometimes from Mona Baker, whose work I profoundly disapprove of, but I think it's proper that students should have a voice other than my own. I steal from Douglas Robinson, who I find extraordinarily stimulating in the classroom. Many of his ideas don't work well in Hong Kong, the non-participatory culture of Hong Kong students, but some of them do work very well. So, is it true that without a theoretical framework it's impossible to discuss a translation profitably? Like John, I learned, like all of us, I learned by the seat of my pants. I've never been in a translation class. At high school I had 6 years of Latin, 6 years of Greek, 6 years of French, a little bit of German, a little bit of Russian, all of which was examined with translation. Was I ever taught how to translate? Every week we had to do our Latin prose composition and our Greek prose composition. We had to translate from English into Latin or into Greek. Did anybody ever tell me how to translate? Sorry, no. Even as late as the 1990s, we did a little survey in the UK of the teaching of Chinese in universities, and we found that, amazingly, in the 1990s, the grammar translation method was still the predominant one. Out of 14 universities, 12 of them used translation as their major assessment tool for foreign language learning. Not one of them taught translation. Where do translators come from? It's not out of books of theory. I've never met anybody who's picked up Newmark and said, oh, that makes me want to be a translator. Right? And yet, although we come from such different directions, the idea of the private theory, Christiana Nord's idea, that each of us as readers develops our own theory of reading, and so each of us, as we read translations, as we do translations, we develop our own private idea of how it should be. That, as a teacher, is what I'm focusing on too. That was a surprise. Right, that's me done.
They're all very stimulating, and I think I've got a few things to say. I think the key word here, first of all, is dichotomy. I think that we all feel that there is a wide gap, I think, between the theory or the translation studies and the practice of translation. I think when I teach a translation class that is actually doing translation, then we always, me and my students, Susan and myself, always presume that there is a kind of the best translation. We'll try to approach it, from whichever way we can, the closer the better. There is, for instance, there's a center, right there, the best, okay? And so that's, I think, probably is a very good way of teaching. But on the other hand, when I'm teaching a course maybe about translation theory, or maybe in the same course, but a theory segment, then it's something different, because tell students, well, it's allowable to sort of to change something, maybe to transform something, to use the jargon term, to transform something. So I think some students are quite confused, and including myself. And I think that's something that perhaps that we should work on, how to sort of lessen this dichotomy, this gap between translation theory and practice and training. So to me, I think there is a danger in current day translation studies is that, you know, it's become too abstract. I think it becomes too sort of cerebral. To me, a theory should serve two purposes. One is to help us translate, to be a better translator. Secondly, to understand the process of translation and to understand the product of translation, I think. But right now there is the danger. I'm not saying that, you know, all translation theories are useless. I think, again, you know, they're very important, but so is training, translation training is equally as important as theory. But my point is that I wish that we could sort of connect these two, you know, theory and practice and training. And if we could do that, I mean, you know, look, when with literature, we have some people writing literature and we have some other people studying literature. And you got literary theory, you got literary studies. And it's the same with art. There's art criticism. Now, you know, we cannot say that art criticism is useless. I think that's what some people are doing. That is perhaps to make translation studies a kind of a legitimate discipline of study in the academia, and also raising its status. And in the same way, some you said, you know, raising the status of translators and their translations. So I think there should be room for both, but I think that we should work on connecting the two.
Thank you, Gilbert. I'm going to allow myself just a few comments here because this is my moment. I've been listening with, you know, in intense interest as my friends and colleagues talk about this subject. And what I'm hearing is that, on the one hand, we need theory to justify what we're doing. And on the other hand, we need theory to provide an academic framework within which we can, again, justify what we're doing. And what I'm still looking for is an actual concrete argument that says that this is actually helping translators become better translators, and I'm not hearing that. I'm not trying to be difficult. All of us seem to be saying pretty much, you know, we taught ourselves how to translate, we never learnt how to translate, but then we had to teach translation because that was our career, right? Because we had to pay the bills, and you know, just doing speed translation for the Government Information Service didn't pay the mortgage, or you know, we were producing translations and we didn't feel that somehow they were justifiable, so we had to justify them. I mean, I have a profound skepticism about all of this, and I'm an extremist on this, so I don't, everybody knows that, it's not a problem. It seems to me that we're involved here in a web of deceit, and it's best to be candid about it.